It's tonight at 8.
Good evening, friends. I'm Dave Ward. This is Eyewitness News. Sports with Bob Allen. The weather with Ed Brandon. 4 people killed, well over 100 were injured today and admitted to area hospitals following a spectacular accident and explosion near the Galleria. A tank truck carrying liquid ammonia went out of control on the exit ramp from the West Loop to the Southwest Freeway. It exploded and crashed onto the freeway below. Several Eyewitness News film crews arrived on the scene just moments after the disaster occurred.
Call an ambulance! Right here!
It was a terrible sight. People stood by dazed, not believing what had happened as ambulance attendants rushed oxygen to victims lying on the freeway pavement, unconscious or gasping for air. All around, a disaster scene, difficult to comprehend. Wrecked cars and trucks, the dead and injured, and everywhere the noxious smell of ammonia gas. Rescue efforts were hampered by the ammonia fumes, which burned the lungs and made breathing difficult for those going in to try to save the injured. For 4 motorists involved in the crash and explosion, it was too late for help. They were already dead. Emergency workers ran from wrecked car to wrecked car, trying to get those overcome by the ammonia fumes out of the scene and to hospitals. Eric Lace was one of those passing motorists who tried to help the injured. Eric, what did you see when you actually came in close to the accident scene?
Okay, I came off the ramp and I saw a man rolling on the ground with people helping him roll on the ground to get he was covered with the white ammonia, and he was trying to, get the white ammonia off. It was obviously burning him.
Lace helped pull the driver of an auto transport truck out of the cab. The man, severely burned, died at the scene. Another man also tried to help.
The first thing I saw was like a capsule. I don't know if it was that tank or if it was the top of the cap of the truck. It just blew up as high as the Humble building, and then followed by a cloud of smoke. It was just horrible. And then I just stopped immediately my car, and then I came out here to try to run because I knew there was a huge amount of people in here, but I couldn't get near because of the
ammonia fumes?
The ammonia fumes. So I couldn't get near, and I started running back, but then when it started clearing out, I came back and I just saw people, I don't know what it was, laying different sections of the area, and we pulled one out over there, and that's all I could take, and I left the scene.
Details of exactly how the accident happened are sketchy.
Well, it looks like the truck was coming from that direction, crossed over the rail, hit this structure here that sheared it in two, and then part of the tank went over to the left here, and then part of the tank, as it exploded, went over this rise, and then the truck sheared up as it came across this way and hit the underside of that bridge, and then flew over this area.
Do you have any information that the driver was traveling too fast or trying to pass another car?
No, we don't at this time. We don't know that. We'll try to reconstruct, but at this time we don't know.
Carino said one of the motorists apparently died trying to escape the ammonia fumes. Instead of running down the highway, he ran across the freeway into a low-lying area under a bridge abutment where there was a lethal concentration of the gas. When ammonia hits a moist area such as the eyes, throat, or lungs, it turns into a substance with burning properties similar to lye. Most of the injured suffered such burns, as Elma Barrera reports. A total of 38 victims were brought in within minutes of the explosion a mile away. At one point, 5 women and 1 man were brought in, all in one crowded ambulance. Inside, the emergency ward was filled with crying, choking victims.
Okay, we've got 18 over here. Oh, there, I think
8 of the 38 were listed in very serious condition, 3 in critical condition.
And that ammonia grabbed me. I backed out just as quick as I could. I picked up 3 people nearby that were needing help and brought them here to 12 Oaks. 1 pregnant lady that was awful sick.
Do we have any portable oxygen we could give to her?
Yeah.
The woman was 5 months pregnant. Another victim, 2-year-old Kerry Johnson, was involved in an automobile collision at the scene of the explosion. He was in serious condition with severe respiratory problems.
Mr. Swint, can you find out from Dr. Canali what they irrigated this child's eyes with?
Most of the victims were carried upstairs, some barely able to talk.
Fog just covered the freeway, and I got out of the car, and I couldn't help but breathe those fumes. I guess it was ammonia. I saw a couple of fellows running along, and they were burning up. Their coats were on fire.
And we started running, and immediately we couldn't breathe. It was just like we were on fire and couldn't breathe inside my lungs and my eyes. And we started running. I could just see myself falling and just dying there on the spot. And I saw he got in his pickup truck, and I just ran and beat on the door. I said, "Let me in," and he just grabbed me and pushed me in.
Many victims didn't even know what had happened. Angelica Garcia was visiting from Mexico, couldn't speak English, and had lost her American relatives in the confusion.
And she doesn't know anybody else, and she's from out of town. She doesn't know where she's staying because she doesn't speak the language, and she doesn't know who to call or anything.
The ammonia fumes were so powerful at the hospital alone that Eyewitness News photographer Ed Bragg had to be treated, along with another radio reporter who had been brought in from the explosion scene. Although there was confusion and disorder here, there were never any neglected patients, even during the initial wave of victims being brought in. This is Elma Barrera, Eyewitness News. Tom Dickerson was at the Bel Air General Hospital.
This is Bel Air General Hospital, where a number of the victims from this morning's disaster on the Southwest Freeway were brought following the incident. A doctor, who is chief of the emergency center here, described for us the situation.
Ammonium in their eyes. We have 3 or 4 that are really bad off. We've irrigated them out, but we need an ophthalmologist to evaluate them. Thank you. Please come.
Go right into it. Okay. Doctor, can you explain for us a little bit what the situation was here and the types of injuries and whatnot that you treated?
We have had approximately 11 people come in, and the main problems are surface contact with the skin and eyes, and this causes burns. And the other problem is inhalation problem, which the most serious complications that can come out of inhaling ammonia would be a closure of the airway, and thus they can't breathe, and also pulmonary edema, which is backing up of the fluid in the blood into the lungs, and this is essentially, they drown from it. We have essentially 2 that I know of that are critically injured. We had one infant that looked about 4 years of age that I think only has some minor inhalation problems. We had another infant that was just transferred to Texas Children's that was almost vital signless, no blood pressure or pulse or anything or respirations when he arrived.
The scene at Bentop Hospital was a little less hectic. Only 4 of the victims from the accident were brought here. One of them reported in critical condition. Meanwhile, back at the scene of the mishap, cleanup operations were getting underway.
After the injured had been taken to the hospitals, firefighters tried to clean up the scene as officials from the Highway Department assessed the structural damage to the freeway interchange. The Southwest Freeway is now open to traffic in both directions. Loop 610, however, is closed northbound through the Southwest Freeway interchange and onto Southwest Freeway outbound. This tragedy, with all its dead and injured, is sure to raise some questions about the advisability of trucks with hazardous loads using highways in heavily populated, heavily trafficked areas. Downtown freeways are off limits to such trucks, but the 610 loop is a legal route for trucks with hazardous loads. This is Jan Carson, Eyewitness News.
Several years ago, Eyewitness News aired a series of reports and a primetime documentary program on the dangers of hauling flammable and toxic chemicals on freeways through heavily populated areas. That program was at least partly responsible for the establishment of the hazardous chemical routes, which are still being used. In light of today's disaster, those routes should now be re-examined. The State Highway Department should immediately post maximum speed limits for chemical haulers, especially on the freeway exit ramps and overpasses, and strict enforcement of those limits instituted by the police department. We have more of this type vehicle traffic in the Houston area than probably anywhere else in the world, and more disasters like this are bound to happen unless more strict safety laws concerning weights, speeds, and routes are written and strictly enforced.